Welcome back to my knitwear channel. Today I have a tutorial for the stitch pattern that I used in one of my designs. I've always been a fan of the traveling cables and slip stitch techniques, so I thought it'd be interesting to combine those two in one design. And this is how the rain sweater pattern came to life. This stitch is very easy to knit and it adds this touch of texture to a plain stockinette stitch fabric. So let's see how it's done. We are going to start with the setup row on the wrong side. Work the edge stitches the way you prefer, then purl 3, and on the 4th stitch you are going to purl the stitch, but instead of wrapping the yarn just once around your right needle, you will wrap it twice, just like that, and you will pull those 2 loops through the stitch on the left needle, just like that. And now you are going to repeat again, purl 3 stitches as usual, and on the 4th stitch you are going to purl, but instead of wrapping the yarn once around your right needle, you will wrap it twice, so you have 2 loops to pull through the stitch on the left needle. You will continue working in this manner until the end of the row. The number of stitches that you work in the pattern on should be divisible by 4. This example, for the edge stitches, I'm using the technique that I shared with you in my first video. It's a 3-stitch I-cord edge. We are coming to the end of the setup row. I'm finishing it with the purl stitch with the yarn wrapped twice around the working needle, just like that. 3 I-cord edge stitch for me. You can work in any pattern that you prefer. And this is what we have so far. So let's get to the next row. This is your right side, and we are basically starting with the pattern itself. Let's take a look at this stitch that was created on the previous row by wrapping the yarn twice around the working needle. We are going to slip this stitch. Next stitch we are going to knit as usual, and then basically we are going to change the position of the slip stitch with the stitch that we just worked on the right needle, just like that. So we shifted this elongated stitch 1 stitch to the left. Knit 2, slip the elongated stitch to the right hand needle without working it. Change the position, basically crossing the last 2 worked stitches on right hand needle, just like that, and then knit 2. So you're gonna repeat it all the way to the end. Basically every single time you see 2 loops on the left needle, it means it's the elongated stitch that we are going to slip off the left needle without working it, then knit the stitch next to it, and then change the position of those stitches, of those 2 stitches on the right hand needle. So this is how your work looks like at this point. You already see how the stitch is being formed. So now we are coming back to the wrong side row. So the point of this tutorial is to actually explain you the logic behind this stitch. So on each wrong side row, you will purl all stitches that we knit on the previous row, and every single time you see this slipped stitch, you're gonna purl the stitch, wrapping the yarn twice around the right hand needle, just like that. Remind you that for this particular stitch pattern, I'm using the stitch count that is divisible by 4. So you are going to purl 3, and as soon as you get to the slipped on the previous row stitch, you're gonna purl it, wrapping the yarn twice around the right hand needle. And you are going to continue working in this manner until the edge stitches of the wrong side row. Here you can see how the texture starts forming. So on each right side row, we are going to knit all the purled on the previous row stitches, and then we are going to slip the elongated stitch and shift it one stitch to the left by changing the position of the two last worked stitches on the right hand needle. Knit 2, slip the elongated stitch on the right needle, knit 1, and change the position of the two last worked stitches on the right hand needle, and so on and so forth until the end of the row. At this point, following the pattern, the stitch pattern becomes very easy because you can actually see on the fabric what is going on and where the elongated stitch is, so it's very easy to detect it and know exactly what you're supposed to do at this point. So this is our progress. We are coming to the wrong side row, and the logic on the wrong side row, basically you are going to purl all the stitches that were knit on the previous row, and as soon as you get to the slipped stitch, you're gonna purl inside of it, wrapping the yarn twice around the right needle. Again, purl 3 and purl 1, wrapping the yarn twice. I just want to point out that in this stitch pattern the number of stitches is very customizable. I purl 3 stitches in between each stitch that we purl with wrapping the yarn twice around the needle, but you can really play around with it and try to purl 4 or 5 stitches in between, whatever works better for you. So this is how our work looks like at this point. As the fabric is growing, the texture becomes more and more visible. It becomes very easy to read the pattern from the fabric without even referring to it on the paper. So here on the right side, I check that I still have space to shift the elongated stitch to the left on the right side, and I continue working in pattern. So I'm on the wrong side, so I purl 3, and each time I see the slip stitch, I purl it, wrapping the yarn twice around the right hand needle, just like that. And I just continue to work until the end of the wrong side row. So I'm coming to the end of the wrong side row, and I can check on the right side where it's very easy to read the pattern that I now have enough space to start a new slip stitch column. So I'm going to purl this stitch, wrapping the yarn twice around the right hand needle, just like that. And now I'm finishing with my edge stitches. So here on the right side you can see those 2 loops, and this is the beginning of the new slip stitch column. So we come into the 2 wraps, slip it off the left needle, knit 1, and then change the position of the 2 stitches on the right hand needle. And then you continue in pattern. As soon as you see the slip stitch column, you're going to shift it to the left. And this is how your work looks like at this point. The stitch pattern is very crisp and stands beautifully against the stockinette stitch fabric. In the rain sweater pattern, I also used the stitch for the sleeves, and today I'm going to show you how you can create this stitch pattern when knitting in the round as well. Set up round, knit 1, wrapping the yarn twice around the working needle, just like that, and then knit 3. You're gonna to repeat this sequence until the end of the round. The number of stitches for this pattern is divisible by 4. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it is up to you. You can modify the pattern a little bit and add more or less stitches in between the slipped stitch columns. I will continue working in the pattern until the end of the round. Finishing it with knit 1, wrapping the yarn twice, and knit 3. We come into the next round, the even round, and we are going to work it by slipping the elongated stitch of the left needle, then knit 1, and then change the position of the 2 worked stitches on the right hand needle, basically shifting the elongated stitch 1 stitch to the left, and you're going to knit the rest of the stitches as usual. I feel like when knitting in the round, it is much easier to read the pattern from the fabric. So as soon as you see the elongated stitch, you're just going to slip it off and then change the position of it with the stitch that comes right after it. Here you can see how this stitch pattern starts getting formed. And on each uneven round, you're going to knit 1, wrapping yarn twice in each slipped on the previous round stitch, just like that. And you're going to knit, as usual, the rest of the stitches. Again, the more your stitch pattern grows, easier it is to read the stitch pattern from the fabric, and especially in the round when you can see everything on the right side. Keep working as established, switching between uneven and even rounds until the desired length of the fabric. Here you can see how this stitch pattern is being formed. The beginning of the round marker is not even necessary for this pattern, because basically you will always see what you're doing on your needles, and you kind of go in spiral, shifting the slip stitch columns to the left. I feel like this stitch pattern is so perfect to adjust a touch of texture to your sleeves, especially at the cuffs. So even if you're knitting a simple pattern, stockinette stitch pattern, and there are no indications or instructions of any textured stitch, you can just experiment and add this stitch pattern to your sleeves. If you want to use my instructions, I remind you that the number of stitches for this pattern is divisible by 4. So just count how many stitches you have on the sleeve, and if needed, adjust the number, and add a pinch of texture to a knitwear piece. And this is how my work looks like at this point. As I said, I'm a big fan of the traveling cables and of the slip stitch, and I'm very happy how this combination worked for me in the rain sweater design, and I hope you can also use it in your own projects. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. Please subscribe, and I will see you next week.